Hey there, and welcome to the first episode of my brand new Factorio 0.17 vanilla playthrough. I'm Xterminator, and thank you for joining me. I'm super excited to get into this, guys. We are doing, like I said, completely vanilla playthrough. There are no mods in this whatsoever because we're going to be exploring all the new features and additions and changes to the latest 0.17 update for Factorio, which you can see here we are currently on. Now, I do want to mention that if you want to get this update, it is an experimental version, so on Steam you'll need to go into the properties for the game in your library and enable beta versions or experimental, whatever it says. Or you can go onto the website if you have an account there and log in, and then go to the experimental section for the downloads and get it there. This is not under the stable version, so this is that's how you get it. Okay. Now, there's a lot of new stuff. So there's a new GUI style here, which you can kind of see. If you've played the game before, you'll notice a significant difference. If this is your first time finding the game, you won't see a difference, but it's still pretty cool. So we're going to start a new game. I'm not going to spend too long in the settings, but I normally don't even show these because it's normally not too interesting, but all these things have changed with this new update, so I do want to show them. We now have these fancy new sliders, which are much more intuitive, and you can more finely tune them to what you want. So I don't want to go crazy with really any of this stuff because I want to kind of just see what the map generation does on its own with default settings, because one of the main changes they've done is change the map generation. But one thing I do want to do is if you go to advanced here, you can set all kind of stuff. But one thing I want to set is research queue availability. Normally, by default, it's set to where you can't get it until you finish the game by launching a rocket. But I want it always on because I want to play around with that. Pollution we do want on, obviously, and we want to modify none of this, I don't believe. We'll just leave this all as default. Enemies we'll leave on default. Enemies are actually going to be a fair bit harder because they've tweaked them a little bit, which they've changed how they absorb pollution, so they're actually going to be generating more units than normal and such, so it's going to be pretty interesting. And then water, all this stuff, so they've changed these. So water now acts a bit differently, and the way we can really see this, best way we can see this is go to the preview. And what I like about what they've done here is you can change these settings in the left here, and it will show you live on the preview what's changed. So if we, for example, maybe take the copper ore up a little bit, it's going to regenerate, and I believe your starting area is pretty much where it centers the map, like right here-ish. And you can kind of see what things look like. And this is what the water looks like and all that. But if we go into terrain and tweak this, so this thing here, overall scale, features, and the space between them. So changing the water is a bit different. So lowering it makes tons of teeny little lakes, whereas raising it all the way gives you not really any water. So this one I don't really want to mess with much. However, the coverage is really we're going to see the difference. How much of the map is covered by this feature? So obviously lowering the water is not going to give you much, but on this one, if you raise it, you'll see a significant difference with much larger lakes and stuff is pretty much what this is going to give you. I am going to bump this to maybe a little higher because I do like the way water generates in this new version. Now, if this is our starting area, I actually really like this spread of resources. There's coal here by our water for some power. The iron is a bit farther away than I'd like, but it is doable. And enemies, again, we're going to leave normal. So this, I don't know what happened to our... Oh, it's over here. The map moved. So this stuff I think I'm all going to leave on. I like the copper the way it is here. It looks like it's fairly abundant. There's a patch here, and there's quite a large amount of copper over here. We'll have to clear out some bases, but that's fine. So we're just going to go and hop in and generate and see what we can get. Okay, now how this playthrough is going to work, guys, is I'm going to be explaining pretty much a lot of the basics, but I'm going to focus a lot on the new features as well, and we're going to go from start here to finish to launching a rocket and beating the game, and that's likely where this playthrough will end. I just want to experience and have you guys experience the entire game in this new version. So let's go ahead and start out. We start out, of course, with our burn-in mining drill and burner furnace, And when you do start a game, this is what you're going to have. Now, one significant difference you may notice if you've played before this update is we no longer have a pickaxe. We don't even have a slot for a pickaxe. And this basically is a pretty huge change, actually. Apologize for that Discord notification. Something's borked on my Discord. We no longer have a pickaxe. Instead, we have a research that's going to kind of compensate for that. That we can get a research to increase our chopping speed and stuff like this and pickup speed. So they've just completely removed pickaxes altogether. So I'm going to chop some trees because we need some fuel to get started. I could have chopped some, or mined some coal up there at the top, but we're down here anyway with some trees. And this will work to start us out. They have changed the tree graphics a little bit, which I really like. It looks quite nice. You can see we have this whole new thing down here, and this is actually a fairly large change, which I do want to go over. Basically, I'm just going to mine some stone here while I cover this. This used to be a toolbar, like a tool belt, where you could stick items directly on it, and it would basically be an extension of your inventory, and then you could use hotkeys to pull items from it. They have changed this fairly significantly at this point to now basically be a hot bar, a reference system. And I'm going to really quickly go into settings here and turn down my game effects sound just a little bit. That chopping is a little bit loud. There we go. So you can no longer put items in this directly. When you stick an item here, this is basically becoming a reference. So this is now pulling from your inventory. It'll show how much is in your inventory, but when I use a hotkey, it pulls it directly from within my inventory. The item is never actually on or in this bar here. So this is pretty interesting. There's, I think, a fair bit of controversy. Some people really like it, some people don't. One nice thing, though, about this is you can have presets. So if we go over here, you can have tons of different presets here. So say you wanted one for base building, you could have assembling machines and belts and stuff like that. You could have one for rails and have one, you know, with rails, of course, and signals and power poles and train stuff. And then you can just easily switch between them, which is really awesome. And I believe it's just shift and then the number. You can see here we're now on 2. Shift 1 is going to put us back on this preset. So it's really, really nice to be able to do that. Now we're just going to make a few more burns. I like to stick several on iron first because iron is something you're going to need quite a bit of. And you can probably see, notice here that we have a little cute ghost icon. This is another new feature they've added. So what this does is this means that if you use the picker tool that's in the vanilla or eyedropper or whatever you want to call it, and hit Q is default, it pulls up whatever you do it on. Now previously, if you didn't have this item, it just wouldn't let you place anything. But now, if you don't actually have the item in your inventory, and you go to place it, it'll place a ghost. Which, if you have robots, they would place it. If you don't have robots, it'll just sit there. But this will basically just be a placeholder for when you do have the item, which is pretty neat. It's a lot nicer than just constantly getting a warning telling you that you can't place anything because you have nothing. So we're going to mine a little more stone here. These guys are just going to get rolling, and then we're going to head back up to coal and get some of that. Now this thing here on the right is kind of an extension of this. This is for all your little tools. There's tons of tools actually that you can find on here. We're going to actually make some burner miner drills and do a nice little trick here on the coal, which I usually do in every playthrough. If you stick these guys facing each other, and you can do this in a much longer line too, which I'll do once I get more of these, they will mine the coal into each other, and then it will be stored like in their output slot here. So then you can just run by and grab them, and they will just mine into each other until they fill up, and you can grab them without having to use chests or belts or anything like that. And then they won't just like back up by dropping on the ground, which is pretty nice. Now, as you saw me do down there at the iron, I'm just pulling stuff out like this. You do this by holding control and left clicking over them, and you can just drag. So I'm just control, hold left, and dragging over it, and it'll pull out anything that is in their output slot. This works for furnaces, obviously, as I did with the iron. It works for, you know, coal and all that stuff, assembling machines, which is really nice. Now, if you control right click, this pulls out half of what's in here. You can see there I pulled 3 out of 6. This guy is actually no longer on iron. We mined that out already. So let's go ahead and stick this here. And we're going to do that, and then we're going to get one more drill going here on the stone with a box, because we obviously need stone being mined. So yeah, this thing down there on the right to our hotbar is like a reference section for all these cool little tools. We have copy and paste tools, which is a new feature in 0.17, which I really want to play around with. We have blueprints and deconstruction planners and upgrade planner. We have the ability to turn on and off parts of our equipment and our power armor once we get that. We have undo stuff. So these are, like, you can't click them from here. A lot of these are bound to hotkeys already. For example, the undo is conveniently Control Z. What I like about these features in the game is that they are using very common hotkeys that would be used in anything else computer related. So, you know, Control C is copy, Control V is paste, Control X is cut, and then obviously you would paste it. And then again, Control Z is undo, which is really, really nice. It's, you know, that way it's just convenient. You don't have to relearn these new hotkeys, and you can just use what you would normally use. So this is a bit of running back and forth, but this is pretty standard early game. The next business here is going to be getting some power. Now, we currently only have 2 miners going on iron. I'd like a third, if possible, because this is actually not that much iron. You're still very iron hungry in the early game here. Let's go ahead and dump some coal in there. And again, the same thing with putting things in there. How I'm doing that is I'm control right clicking, and this is sticking half of the stack in each thing. If I just control left click, it'll stick the whole stack in, but I want to be able to split it between the two, right? So I'm going to do that. One thing here that we want to do is, there we go. So I'm hitting Alt, which is this Alt mode down here. The default key is actually Alt. This is the like advanced information, which I highly suggest having on. It helps a lot. Okay, so let's get that, and let's get some stuff going. So we need a boiler, of course. We do need another furnace, and we actually need something on copper, because we're going to need a little bit of copper for a pump and such for this power. So we've got that. We need a bit more stone. Let's grab that, and then the copper, luckily, is conveniently right up top here. So just get that. I can't create references for this, although I'm going to be out of this burner stage very soon here, so I don't really want to mess with that. I do want to clear the stone. If you want to clear something, you just middle mouse click, and it will clear it. You can also, instead of dragging things like I did previously, you can just left click and set it to whatever you want from the menu here. Now, if you don't have a middle mouse click, you can, of course, rebind this to whatever you want. So let's grab some coal. And we have a steam engine, not made, I guess I made a boiler instead. Grab some copper, so we can now make a pump. And then we're going to make some pipes. I'm going to actually make an underground pipe, and I'll show you why here in a minute. Let's go ahead and dump some of that in there, dump some of that in there. Grab the rest of this stone. We really only need 1 boiler, 1 pump, and 1 steam engine for now. This will supply 900 kilowatts, you can see their power, which is it's enough to start with. And we have our coal here. This is very, very convenient, and because we have a ton of room up above, so I'm just going to start over here. I'm going to start like right here-ish, and then we can just expand our power upwards as we need to. So this is why I'm doing an underground here. You could just do a normal pipe, but you can't walk through normal pipes. These underground pipes, of course, leave a space you can walk through, which is super convenient because this allows me to, you know, walk past this without having to go all the way around. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we need a boiler. So this boiler has a steam output. It turns the water into steam, and this is where we want to plug our steam engine in, is right here, right? Steam into the steam input. And then we will, of course, shovel the coal in from this end. So you want to make sure when you're setting this up, of course, that you're not turning it this way and then trying to shovel coal in the same engine the steam engine's on, because that won't work. I am using a burner inserter. This is a lot of personal preference. The reason I use burner inserters is because these don't require electricity from the grid. They run on fuel themselves, which means that if your power goes out, the inserters will still be able to stick fuel into your boilers, even if there's no power, which helps with preventing like feedback loops. Now you may wonder why would there, why would there be no power if you're still able to insert coal? But there's certainly situations where it can happen. Maybe a pipe got destroyed or something, and there's no water, or other situations like that. And the main thing is that then you don't have to jump start it, because obviously if you have no power and you use normal inserters, they can't insert fuel, and then even once you reconnect whatever the problem is, you're not going to have power to insert the coal, so on and so forth. Whereas this, it'll just continue doing it even if you just have no power. So that way, once you fix whatever the issue is, it'll just kick right back on with fuel in the boilers, which is very nice. Okay, so we have quite a bit of iron here. We have our steam engine. The next order of business is going to be making a lab, because we're going to have to do some research. Now, research has changed a fair bit. And this is actually another huge change to this 0.17 update that I wanted to play with. Not only has the tech tree changed a bit, both visually and recipe-wise, you can see visually this is far different than what we had previously. Nice transparent background here, a bit of a different look here, and then we have our research queue up here, which is very nice. And to add things to this queue, we're actually going to right now. You can, there's no drag and drop, but you can just start research, and once you do this, you can just queue up what you'd like. So, for example, maybe we want assembling machines, and then we want some military, then we want some logistics. It'll queue these up, and once one is done, it'll just move on to the next one. Now, one feature that's seriously lacking, in my opinion, is you cannot rearrange these. You have to get rid of it, and then, like, get rid of whatever one you want to place it before and stuff. It's a bit of a pain. It'd be really nice if you could drag and drop or something to rearrange these, is really my only complaint with that. So we're going to go ahead and make some science packs. We have exactly 10 that we can make, and I'm right-clicking here to make 5 at a time. You could shift left-click to make all of them if you wanted. And then we're going to make a power pole if we had some copper. I know that obviously does not have fuel, but it doesn't need it at the moment. So the other thing that's changed is the science packs themselves. The automation science packs, and then the green ones, which are logistics science packs, which we'll get a little bit later, those recipes have remained the same for a very long time, and they still are the same. However, the science packs after that have pretty different recipes than they did in the previous versions, which is, this is probably my favorite iteration of these science pack recipes that we have, and I'm going to have a lot of fun actually playing around with the builds and figuring out the good ratios for them and nice builds and setups to make those. So let's run over here, and we're going to throw some coal into this boiler. This thing is going to eat this quick. This boiler burns through this quick, but the nice thing is it only does it until it gets enough steam, and then it's going to stop once it fills up. You can see right here, it just stops. So once we draw some power, of course, it'll kick back on, but we're just going to stick a lab here. So if you see this icon, this can be really confusing for new players. This was super confusing for me. This does not mean that you don't have power. Well, it does on... So this is why it's confusing. Because on buildings, when you see this, it means you have no power. On a steam engine, when you see this, it does not mean that you don't have power. It means that you have no power draw. Or no power connection, rather. Because as soon as I hook up a power pole, it goes away. It just means that there's no power connection, which I guess means the same on buildings, but it's still a little bit confusing. Because when I first saw this, I thought that I did my setup wrong, like this just wasn't working because it wasn't generating power. But that's not what it actually means. So now if we stick these in here, this will start on the research, which obviously takes conveniently 10. And this will start burning fuel again at a much slower rate. We're barely using any power. You can see here, 60 kilowatts. And we have a new graph here, which is pretty cool. It's fairly close to the one we had previously, but it's a lot cleaner, looks a lot nicer. So let's go ahead and start with some electric machines. Until now, we've been using the burner machines, but now that we have power, we can start using these electric machines, which obviously are much better because you don't have to fuel them directly. And the first one is we're going to put some coal onto a belt and send it over here so this can be automatically fueled. So we're going to stick that on coal. We're going to make some transport belts. I'm going to make them in a few sets of 5. And we're going to hook that all up. Now I'm going to go get some more materials while these are crafting. And run down here. Refuel these. We're going to leave these going for a bit because, again, it's so iron hungry that until I get my main smelter up and running, we do want that iron going constantly because I'm gonna be using a lot of iron. So we're going to take this belt. We've made 30 because it gives you 2 per output. 2 per craft, right? You can see there 2 times at the top. And we're going to run this over. Now, one thing you may notice is, first off, I didn't make enough belt. But they've changed the belt graphics a bit, and it's really nice. There's now these little cogs and conveyors like an actual conveyor belt in real life would be underneath it, which I think just adds a very, very neat effect to the game. It's really, really cool. So I'm actually going to pull this back a little bit and run it more this way, because then we can add some more boilers and just pull straight from the belt. And we finished the research. Now military is queued up. Obviously it's not starting because we haven't made any more packs, so I'm going to do that now. So if we take this guy and run some power over this way, let's do that, and then hook him up. Not going to quite reach, unfortunately. Need one more power pole. Let's go get some trees while we're at it. So that's going to make that automatically fueled, which is very, very nice, because then we don't have to worry about it again. These new belt graphics are super cool, though. I really like them. They've made the splitters and underground things, which we don't have access to yet, much nicer as well. Okay, so there we go. This thing's now obviously drawing a bit more power, but still far less. It's 1/10 of what this one steam engine can do. And we're going to throw some more science packs in here. Get this military going. It's only 10 as well. Because, like I said, the enemies are now going to be a bit harder. They've changed how the spawners absorb pollution, which is what generates units to trigger attacks. And from what I've heard, it's a fair bit more difficult than it used to be previously. And there's another new feature. So if you can't do something, like you can't reach, or you can't place something, it gives you a nice little flying text here telling you why you can't do it. Now, a lot of times, it's extremely obvious why you can't do it, but sometimes it's not. And having that little text there is really nice, especially for newer players who don't know all the intricacies of the game. It's a nice little, tip there as to why something does or doesn't work. So let's go through the rest of these science packs in. It's quite dark, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to queue up optics here after logistics. I can see, but I know it makes YouTube viewing a bit difficult for you guys to see when it's this dark. Now, in terms of enemies, we do actually have a few down here. This is our pollution, this kind of brownish, reddish cloud. Once this starts hitting these bases, the bases are going to absorb it and then start generating attack parties to come and attack us, which is going to be pretty interesting. They've also completely reworked the graphics of the biters and the spitters, which are the enemies here, and that makes it terrifying. I'm going to be honest. They've made them a lot more bug and creepy-like, and as someone who hates bugs in real life, these things actually, like a full-on attack, is really quite horrifying. It fits really well with the game, but if you're not a fan of bugs, you're definitely gonna want to do some extermination here. Okay, so that's backing up on coal. The next step here is going to be to get some on iron and actually start a automated smelting setup. So we have coal here, we have copper, we have iron. There's 2 options. We could either do our smelting to the right, which is going to be quite difficult as there's cliffs right here. I left cliffs default. Normally I turn them down because they can be quite frustrating. However, another new feature, and I know I'm throwing out all these new features, guys. It's a lot to process. It'll make more sense once we go more into the game and talk about them more. I did do an overview video as well that covers them more individually and demonstrates a lot of them if you want to check that out. But yeah, so the cliffs, one new feature of 0.17 is robots can now destroy cliffs with a deconstruction planner and cliff explosives, which we'll get later. And this is really cool because before you couldn't do that. Before you had to run around by hand chucking these cliff explosives at them, which became extremely tedious. But now that robots can do it, it's really quite nice. So I'm going to craft a submachine gun, which we got via the military research. and some more ammo. I mean, the attacks won't be huge. We aren't even going to trigger one for a little bit, but I do want to be prepared. It would be quite embarrassing to die. So back to the smelting, I think our best bet is going to be building it off to the left here. Again, these cliffs are kind of really in the way here, and I don't have a way to destroy them yet. But building it off to the left, we are going to hit some cliffs over here. But this does give us this whole area to build smelting, and we could actually just push it out really far out to here, but this will be sufficient for right now. So let's go ahead and take some of these, and we'll leave those guys there. We can fill that in later with electric miners. Let's do that. We now have automation, so one thing I'd like to do is craft some assembling machines. I was going to hand make belts, but belts are something you're obviously going to need a ton of, and setting up some very basic automation for them right away is, in my opinion, a very smart thing to do. So we're going to make a few inserters, and we're going to use 2 assemblers because belts take gears and iron. So I'm going to go to where we have power. This is very temporary, guys. If we do this, we're going to make some belt. Okay, we have the iron, obviously, but we have to make the gears. So take another assembler and leave a space and go into intermediate products and make gear wheels. Then we're going to take this handy inserter and insert from one into the next, and then we're going to stick a few boxes here. We're going to stick, this is actually going to require quite a few boxes. We're going to stick something like this. And you'll see how this is going to work out. So, like that. So this guy needs iron, of course, to make these gears. So we're going to stick some in here. And then this guy needs iron itself. So we're going to stick some into here. And that's going to work and make us some belt. Now, is it super fast? Not really. In fact, these assemblers are a slower crafting speed than I have. They have a craft speed of 0.5, whereas I have a craft speed of 1. However, the advantage being that they just work always, as long as they have materials. Whereas me, I only have the crafting queue that works like literally. So if I'm making belts, I can't make anything else till the belts are done. So this is just going to always work, and then I can just make whatever I want in my own queue. So let's go grab some more iron since we dumped all of ours into there. Throw some more fuel into that. And there we go. So let's make some furnaces and do setups. Now, for anyone who's coming from versions previous to this, you may know that there are ideal smelting ratios, and that for stone furnaces on yellow transport belt, it is ideal to do 24 furnaces per side of the belt to fill the belt. However, they've changed things a little bit. They've changed spacing of items on belts, which resulted in belts actually having the ability to transport more items. So the yellow belt, this guy here, used to be able to transport a very odd amount. It was like 13.3 items a second. It's now a flat 15. And a lot of people were worried this was going to change the ratios. However, to compensate, they've now changed the iron plate, copper plate, and stone brick smelting speeds from 3.5 down to 3.2, which we have here, seconds, and then steel is changed from 17.5 seconds to 16 seconds, which conveniently means that none of these ratios change. And I mention that both for new players for the ratios, but for players who have been with us several versions before this, is to not worry, because now these ratios are not changed. Your 24 furnace yellow belt and 24 steel furnace red belt ratios are the same they always were. So this would be a good time to set up some references, because I'm going into my inventory quite often at this point. So I'm going to set up some references here. We don't have splitters or undergrounds unlocked yet, but we will here shortly. Speaking of which, let's make some science packs. Okay, so let's take this and let's start it right about, I want to line things up here, right about here-ish should do just fine. We can scoot it back a little bit. Let's do that. Okay, so I like to just place these directly next to each other. You can do sets of 2s. It allows you to put power poles in between. Personally, I just like doing it this way. It's a lot of whatever you prefer. And then the setup that I like doing, there's many different ways to do this, and I've done many videos on smelting setups and stuff. If you want to check out multiple ways, there's other videos people have done. But my preferred method is doing something along the lines of this. So we have 3 belts. We have 2 belts on the outside, and we have a belt in the middle. This belt in the middle is going to be our output belt. This is what the smelted plate is going to output onto. And then the 2 belts on the outside are going to be shared belts. And because belts can carry 2 different items on different lanes. You'll notice here with the coal, for example, the coal is only on one side of this belt because the miner's directly onto that side. So belts have 2 lanes. So if I wanted, I could put an entirely different item on this lane, and it would work great. Obviously, I would not want this for that, but this is what we're going to do down there. So down there, what we're going to do, I'd like to feed this more iron, but I really don't have very much. What we're going to do down there is we're going to have coal on one half of the belt and iron ore on the other half, and then the inserters, because inserters are smart, they'll grab what they need, and that way they can grab both from one belt here. Now, how are we going to get these onto the same belt? There is a way to do it without any splitters or underground belts, but it is quite messy. Just to demonstrate, what you can do, this is what we call side loading or side merging. If you do this, this can allow you to do it. If you have one resource here and one resource here, it's going to dump it onto the respective side of the belt. So if we had like coal and iron ore would be on the right, coal would be on the left. And we're going to do a principle very similar to this, but this is kind of messy for what we want to do. Once we get these splitters and underground belts, there's a much nicer, more efficient way to do it, which is what I like doing for this setup. So what we can do, though, is, for example, we can use our little ghost thing, and I'll set it up. So I'm going to do something like this. We take a splitter, take another splitter, and we take the belt, and it's the same principle as what I just showed you, but much nicer, because now this is sending it in both directions and putting it on half the belt. And then what we're going to do is use, okay, well this is just going to be iron ore, so he'll just come in from there, but we do need coal, so coal is going to come in from over here. So that it looks a little weird in the ghost, but it'll work once we actually place it. Potentially. There we go. And that's going to be an underground belt, so carry it underneath here and go into this splitter. And then iron ore, again, will plug in here, which we can actually do right now. Connect this up, and then that'll split it half and half, and then we'll, of course, have some inserters, which will grab from the furnaces and then output here on the middle belt, which will work very well. It's a little bit resource intensive setting all this up, but it works really well, and once you get it running, it's going to produce quite a lot of materials. So I need to dump these science packs in there so we can get this logistics research. Our pollution, luckily, is not spreading too much. It's spreading more to the top because different tiles absorb different pollution amounts. So this is like desert sandish. This is going to absorb much less pollution than like grass down here. Plus we have a forest down here, which trees absorb even more pollution, so that's why it's spreading less to the bottom than it is to the top. And I think this is a good place to end, guys. This video has been over 20 minutes, I believe. I don't want to do super long, but we got some power up. We got a science or 2 done, and getting logistics. We're going to get our first smelting setup done next episode and continue on from there. I am so excited to play with these new features and play with the new science pack recipes and all that. There's so much to mess around with. I can't wait to show you guys, and I hope you are as excited as I am and looking forward to the next episode. If you have any questions or thoughts or anything like that, leave them down below in the comments, and I will read them and do my best to respond. And yeah, I believe that'll do it, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.